to realize the potential I had when I set out on this career path 40 years ago.
Where was Nicholas Lyndhurst, the longtime buddy of Dr. Crane, in the past 2 episodes of the Frasier reboot? Following the death of his father Martin, Frasier makes a third-act return to Boston. He bought his estranged son Freddie's apartment building and moved into the flat across the hall to reconnect with him. But when Frasier returned to Boston, Freddie was not the only old friend he reconnected with. As a courtesy to Alan, his Oxford classmate, Frasier gave a guest lecture at Harvard University in the first revival episode. Frasier ultimately shared an office with Alan and took a professorship at Harvard. Despite being one of Frasier's closest friends since college, Alan remained unseen throughout the entirety of Cheers and the Frasier series. Alan was likely teaching at Harvard during both Cheers and Frasier. Alan has been teaching at Harvard for a long time, so long that he holds tenure. The story portrays Alan as disillusioned with teaching, yet his grandfathered status prevents the institution from dismissing him. This is a time-worn comedy archetype. The tenured professor, who has been teaching for so long and whose position is so safe that he hardly works at all anymore. Alan was probably teaching at Harvard for Frasier's entire time on TV. Given that the original run of Frasier took place in Seattle, it would make sense that Alan was busy teaching at Harvard. Alan never traveled to Seattle to visit his old college friend, likely due to his commitment to a demanding career in Boston. Teaching at Harvard during Cheers' Boston set run would make less sense. Alan might have been teaching at another university somewhere else in the nation during Cheers. Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense for Frasier and Alan to never see each other throughout that period. Why wasn't Alan mentioned in Cheers or Frasier? Is there a plot hole? The quick response is that Alan's absence from Cheers and the first Frasier series does indeed constitute a plot hole. Frasier and Alan have apparently been best friends for 40 years. However, Frasier neglected to mention Alan once in 20 years on television. The real-world reason for this is that Alan hadn't fully developed yet. Although there is no official in-universe explanation for why Frasier didn't mention Alan for 2 decades, it could simply be that this is how life sometimes operates. Because they feature returning cast members, comedies tend to stay in each other's lives. For 10 years, the 6 friends saw one another every single day. However, this is not always the case in real life. In real life, 2 individuals may be the closest friends for years, but after one of them relocates for a job, they may not speak for a decade. Close at Oxford, Frasier and Alan pursued separate lives for a few decades before fate brought them back together. Why did Frasier's reboot introduce Alan when he wasn't in Cheers or Frasier? Why then did the Frasier reboot's character introduction cause a plot hole inside the 2 previous shows? The writers wanted that kind of character for Frasier to play off. Therefore, although Frasier and Alan's long connection might not make sense in the framework of the bigger Cheers cinematic universe, it makes sense for the narrative of the reboot, which finds Frasier returning to his roots. If David Hyde Pierce had consented to portray Niles in the reboot, it would not need Alan. Alan essentially performs that function. In the original Frasier series, Niles' ingenuity was in giving Frasier an even Frasierer version of himself to play off. In Cheers, Sam Malone's everyman appeal contrasts with Frasier's stifling intellectualism. The writers of the first Frasier spin-off presented an even more stifling intellectual, Frasier's snobbish brother, to help Frasier seem more like a Sam-esque everyman by comparison. Alan fulfills that role in the Frasier remake.